How Khalid ibn al-Walid became the sword of Allah. Some stories do not begin with sunrise. They begin with blood, fire, and destiny. The story of Khalid ibn al-Walid, the sword of Allah, is one of those legends. He was a man whose every scar was a line in the record of history, and whose every battle was a chapter written in steel and faith. People said that in his time there was no general who inspired in his enemies both respect and fear as he did. Yet before he became an immortal symbol of Islam, Khalid once stood on the other side of the light. He raised his sword against the Prophet Muhammad himself. If you have ever thought that legends are born perfect, this story will change your mind. Khalid was not born in the sanctuary of belief. He came into the world in the desert of Mecca, where the wind carried the pride of idol worshippers, where tribal honor stood above justice, and where pride was the truest religion of men. In that world, a child was trained to be a warrior. From the time he could form words, Khalid knew how to grip a blade. While other children memorized poetry, he learned how to slash the air, how to snap a spear, and how to lead. He grew up believing that strength was the only measure of truth, and that the strong would right what is right. No one imagined that this very belief would drive Khalid to walk a path few would dare to take. A journey from darkness into light. It was the journey of a soul torn between honor and truth, between human pride and the call of Allah. When the Prophet Muhammad began to proclaim the message of the one God, Khalid looked at him with the eyes of a rival. He could not understand how a man born in Mecca would dare to challenge centuries of tribal tradition. He saw Islam as rebellion, as a threat, as a force that would tear down the order his forefathers had built. And so Khalid drew his sword. Fate, however, is full of ironies. That very sword would later become the emblem of the faith he had once fought. In the dust and smoke of the first clashes between Mecca and Medina, amid the shouts of the tribes, the name of Khalid rose like a hard desert wind. He was a commander whose eyes could read the battlefield, a fighter who made enemies wary. Yet even then, destiny was arranging something greater. The man who wounded Islam most deeply would become its greatest protector. The Byzantine and Sasanian empires were struggling for power and spilling blood like rivers to the north. Almost no one was watching a small corner of the Arabian Peninsula, where a spiritual revolution was quietly gathering. Among dunes and wind, the first Muslims, led by the Prophet, were laying the foundations of a new faith. From that land a name would echo to the horizons: Khalid ibn al-Walid, the warrior who did not know defeat. He was no angel. He once doubted, lost his way, and drowned in the fame and pride of Mecca. Yet in the violent collision of darkness and light, Khalid was reborn. His story is not only the journey of a warrior, it is a testimony to the transformative power of faith, that Allah can turn the man who raised a sword against his messenger into the sword of Allah. That is where many legends begin, not with victory, but with awakening. Welcome to Spiritual Echo Stories, where the sacred reverberations of history still pulse in the hearts of people today. Here, we do not simply tell stories. We bring back to life the moments that changed the course of humankind. If you would like to keep walking with us through forgotten pages of history and listen to the echoes of undying souls, subscribe to Spiritual Echo Stories now. Every subscription is a torch that helps us continue our journey to bring the greatest stories of humanity closer to the heart of the world. Khalid ibn al-Walid was born into a world where tribal honor was a religion, where the drumbeat of war set the rhythm of daily life, and where strength was the only language respected. He was the son of al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, one of the most powerful leaders of the Quraysh, a wealthy and proud clan in Mecca. As a child, Khalid was sent into the desert to grow in harsh air, where people learned to read the wind, follow the stars, and live beside danger. When he returned to Mecca, he was not a tender city boy. He was a desert warrior with a hardened body and eyes as cold as a blade. From a young age, Khalid was taught that courage and honor were everything. His father would repeat the same line again and again: "A man is not born to live long. He is born to live so that his name is spoken after he dies." That sentence carved into Khalid a certainty that glory could be won only by the sword. He became a skilled horseman, formidable in wrestling, and a master of cavalry tactics. People of his time said that when he was young he once bested Omar ibn al-Khattab in a match and his opponent's leg broke. an early sign of strength and an unyielding will. That talent, instead of serving the light, was first used to fight it. When the Prophet Muhammad began to preach Islam in Mecca, the Quraysh viewed it as a threat to their power and tradition. Khalid, fiercely loyal to his tribe, became one of the most determined opponents. He did not fight out of hatred, but out of his conviction that he was protecting the legacy of his ancestors. He believed the followers of Muhammad were weak people lost in the illusion of a single God. That belief was about to be tested. The Battle of Badr struck Khalid's life like the first great storm. The Muslims had just over 300 fighters. The Quraysh had nearly 1,000. Well equipped and confident of victory, history turned another way. The Quraysh were defeated, and the men Khalid had dismissed as nobodies won a radiant triumph. Among the captives was his brother, Walid. Khalid paid the ransom to bring him home, not knowing that during his captivity Walid had embraced Islam. When Walid returned to Mecca, his eyes shone with a new conviction. He said, "Brother, I have found what I never knew I was seeking." Khalid was stunned. His loyalty to his tribe collided with a feeling he had never known. The feeling of a man beginning to doubt himself. In the months that followed, Khalid lived torn in two. He saw Muslims driven out, forbidden to make pilgrimage, stripped of their possessions, yet they held to their belief. They prayed, they stood firm. He could not grasp what power allowed them to remain unshaken. When the Battle of Uhud drew near, Khalid was called again. This time he commanded the cavalry of the Quraysh, hungry to avenge the loss at Badr. On the sands of Uhud, the wind moved across the dunes like a warning of what was to come. At first the Muslims held the upper hand, but their overconfidence turned the tide, when the archers on the hillside left their posts to gather spoils. Khalid saw the opening destiny offered. With the speed and precision of a hawk, he led his cavalry around the pass and struck from behind. The battle turned. The Muslims fell into chaos and many were killed, including Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, the Prophet's uncle. Khalid returned to Mecca to cheers, but his heart was not at peace. He had seen bodies desecrated on the field and felt a strange ache he could not name. He had won, yet why did victory feel so empty? Was it because he had been fighting for the wrong purpose? On the other side, were those people fighting not for honor, but for belief? In the years that followed, news of Muhammad reached him again and again. The man he had once called an enemy had become a symbol of mercy and steadfastness. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah brought a pause to war between Mecca and Medina. When Khalid saw the Muslims performing their pilgrimage with order, calm, and reverence, he recognized something his life of battles had never taught him. True strength was not in the blade. It was in a heart that submits to truth. Sleepless nights followed. The prayers of the Muslims echoed in his memory and mingled with the desert wind like an invitation. He saw his brother in dreams. He saw faces lifted high despite poverty. He saw light where he had believed there was only darkness. One morning Khalid knew he could not live as he had before. A new chapter was opening, one in which his sword would no longer serve human pride, but the Lord of all creation. That morning the desert was unusually still. The first light laid gold across the long strips of sand. Inside Khalid Ibn Al-Walid a storm was rising. After years of fighting, conquest, and defiance, he realized he no longer belonged to the dark. A letter from his brother Walid, simple yet burning, brought down the wall of pride inside him. "You have missed too much. Khalid, do not miss the greatest thing that waits for you, faith." Those words pierced the many layers of armor he had worn to fight his own conscience. He stayed awake through the night. The wind through the mountain pass reminded him of every battle, every body, every hollow victory. He understood that he had fought all his life for honor, but had never truly fought for truth. He remembered the prayers of the Muslims he had once called enemies and the serenity in their faces as they knelt amid smoke and fire. There was something in them he could not comprehend. A belief that made people strong yet humble, fierce in battle without hatred. He realized that this was what he had never possessed. Khalid decided to set out. He went to two old friends, Safwan ibn Umayyah and Ikrimah ibn Abu Jahl, and invited them to travel with him to Medina. They refused. Pride and resentment still held them fast. Khalid understood that this path was not for the hesitant. He went home, prepared his horse, and sought out Uthman ibn Talha, a close friend who carried the same unrest in his heart. When Khalid said, "I intend to go to the Prophet and declare my faith," Uthman said nothing. He only nodded. They looked at one another and knew this would be the journey that would change their lives. Before dawn they left Mecca. The desert sand felt as fine as silk under hoof. The cold wind stung their faces. But their hearts were on fire. On the way they met Amr ibn al-As, once a proud strategist of the Quraysh, now riding to Medina with the same purpose. 3 men who had been enemies of Islam, who had raised swords against Muhammad, now traveled side by side into the light. They said little. They listened to the beat of hooves on sand, like the knocking of destiny. When the city of Medina came into view on the horizon, Khalid's heart grew heavy. He, the man whose name had sent Muslim fighters to the ground, would now stand before the Prophet, the man he had tried to destroy. Fear and shame wrapped around him like an invisible net. As he approached, a gentle voice called out, "Hurry, Khalid. The Prophet knows that you are coming and he is very glad. He is waiting for you." It was Walid, his brother, guided earlier by Allah. Khalid paused, drew a deep breath, and stepped forward. Inside a modest room sat the Prophet Muhammad, when Khalid entered. The Prophet's gaze seemed to look through his past, through layers of sin and pride. There was no anger in those eyes, only mercy. He smiled and said, "You are not late, Khalid. We have been waiting for you a long time." Khalid choked up. For the first time in years his heart felt light. He knelt and whispered, "I am here, O Messenger of Allah." In the stillness, Khalid recited the Shahada and declared that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Tears ran down his face. They were not the tears of regret, but of release. The room felt full of light. The Prophet placed his hand on Khalid's shoulder and said, "From this day, you are one of the swords of Allah. It is not a sword of pride, but of justice and mercy." Khalid wept. He had used his sword to cut, to win, to make others fear. Now he understood that the true sword was not for conquest, but for the defense of what is right. The warrior who had once been Islam's nightmare became its shield. After that meeting, Khalid took a hair and a few strands from the beard of the Prophet and kept them wrapped in his turban like a sacred treasure. He said, "Whenever I carry them, I feel protected, because I no longer fight alone. Allah is with me." In the years ahead he would carry that keepsake into every battle. Each time, victory arrived. It was not Khalid's victory. It was the victory of faith. When Khalid left that room, the Mecca he had known was behind him. Ahead lay a new road, not paved with honor or power, but lit by the light of Islam. He was no longer a warrior of the Quraysh. He was a soldier of Allah. From that moment history recorded it. The man who had been the blade of hatred became the sword of Allah. Sayfullah, the general of faith who would carry justice to the world. Once Khalid Ibn Al-Walid had declared his faith, the world no longer saw him as an enemy of Islam. He became a fresh wind carrying the strength of Allah. The former Quraysh fighter became a commander of the Muslims, a man that even unbelievers would admit had been chosen by Allah to write grand chapters of history. Not long after his conversion, the Prophet entrusted him with command at the Battle of Muta, the first clash between the Muslims and the Byzantine Empire. It was a battle that looked like certain death. 3,000 Muslims faced more than 100,000 Roman soldiers, armed with bows, and supported by war elephants. The first 3 Muslim commanders fell in succession: Zayd ibn Haritha, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, and Abdullah ibn Rawaha. When Khalid was chosen to take command, he understood that victory by the numbers was nearly impossible. He did not see the field through numbers. He viewed it through the lens of faith. He said, "We do not fight for life or death. We fight for Allah. If we win, it is a grace. If we die, it is glory." With strategic brilliance, Khalid shifted the lines to create the illusion of fresh reinforcements. He broke the force into small groups that struck from many directions, spreading confusion among the Romans and making them believe they were being encircled. Over 3 savage days of combat, Khalid broke 9 swords. That detail was not a boast. It was a measure of the ferocity and resolve. At last he withdrew in perfect order, saving the entire Muslim army from destruction. When news reached Medina, the Prophet said, "That is the sword of Allah." raised to defend what is right. From that day, Khalid bore the title Sayfullah, the sword of Allah, a name the world would repeat for centuries. From Muda, the fire in Khalid burned brighter than ever. He no longer fought for tribal honor, but for faith. Under Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, he led the Ridda campaigns to quell the rebellions of tribes that broke faith after the passing of the Prophet. He fought not only with strength, but with absolute loyalty. When others hesitated, Khalid said, "I will not stop until the call of Allah reaches every house, whether it is made of wood or stone." Under Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, Khalid inscribed more shining pages in history. He led the army at Yarmuk, one of the greatest battles in Islamic history. In front of him stood 100,000 Byzantine troops. Behind him were only a few thousand Muslims. This time Khalid was not only a commander, he was the living spirit of the army. He walked the ranks and told the warriors, "You do not fight with numbers. You fight with faith. One steadfast believer is stronger than 1,000 with none." When the fighting began, the desert dust rose like smoke and veiled the sky. Khalid moved his formations with fluid grace, splitting the cavalry into spear points that struck, withdrew, and struck again, like a desert wind that could not be predicted. The enemy faltered, their lines broke, and in just a few days the mighty Byzantine host was shattered. After the battle, Khalid did not lift his head in pride. He only bowed it and whispered, "This victory is not mine. It is Allah's." Khalid's hardest test did not come from the battlefield. It came from within. In one campaign, Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, sent an order removing Khalid from overall command and appointing Abu Ubaidah in his place. The order arrived in the midst of operations. The courier handed him the letter. Khalid glanced at it, tucked it inside his tunic, and kept leading until the outcome was secure. Then he handed over command and said, "I fight for Allah, not for a title." Abu Ubaidah embraced him and wept, because he knew that only truly great men can be that humble. Khalid confided to companions that he once longed for a quiet life, to sit with the Quran and commit its verses to heart. He also understood that Allah had chosen him for another mission, the mission of the sword. "I wanted to sit with books," he said, "but destiny set me in the middle of the battlefield. I am a soldier of Allah, and I will fight until my last breath." In just 3 years, under Khalid's leadership, Syria, Persia, and Iraq came beneath the banner of Islam. No general in history achieved such feats in so short a span. Yet what people remember is not only that he won, it is how he fought. He did not kill to subjugate. He fought to set people free. He did not demand spoils. He asked only that Allah accept his service. Khalid was not a perfect man. He made mistakes, lost his temper, and once craved glory. After Allah guided him, he learned that real strength is not in the blade, but in bowing to the will of the Almighty. That humility turned him into a legend, not only of the battlefield, but of belief itself. In the hearts of Muslims, Khalid ibn al-Walid will always be Sayfullah, the sword of Allah, a man before whom even time bends its head to his resolve. As evening fell over Homs, an old soldier lay quiet on his bed. His body bore hundreds of scars, each one a shard of history. The sword that made the world tremble now rested beside him like a faithful friend at the end of the road. This was Khalid ibn al-Walid, the sword of Allah, the undefeated commander whose name once shook both the Byzantine and Sasanian empires. Today he was dying, not on a battlefield, but on his own bed. "O Khalid, you longed for martyrdom, yet fate did not grant it," he whispered in a voice rough as the desert wind. "There is no patch of skin on me without a wound, and now I die like a sick man." A dry tear traced his cheek. He did not fear death. He had simply never imagined such a quiet end. A life spent galloping across battlefields would now finish within 4 walls. It was a bitter paradox known only to those who have lived for an ideal. Outside, the soldiers who had followed him stood in silence with reddened eyes. They remembered the commander who always led from the front, who never slept before his men, who never ate while they were hungry. To them, Khalid was not only a general, he was the living emblem of faith, proof that a resolute heart can change the destiny of the world. Khalid never called himself a legend. He knew that everything he had done was only a reflection of the will of Allah. I have never won a battle by my own power. He used to say, every victory belongs to Allah. His family gathered at his side and he motioned to be lifted. He looked around at the simple room. There was no gold or silver, only a worn suit of armor, his beloved horse, and the sword that had traveled with him all his life. He smiled, faint and deep, like the last wind of the season. This is all I own. My horse, my sword, and my faith. Give my horse to a brave rider who will charge into danger without fear. Bury me with this sword. I wish to meet Allah in the form of a warrior. His gaze drifted afar and a weak yet steady light came into his eyes. People say I am invincible, he said, yet I have never known a peaceful day. I have fought without pause, from one campaign to the next, for one reason only, that Islam might spread and people might know the justice of Allah. If anyone thinks I sought fame, look at my hands, they hold nothing but calluses. If anyone thinks I sought wealth, look at this room, there is nothing in it but sand and breath. In that quiet, Khalid remembered Yarmuk, the battle where blood ran like a river and the wind screamed like an angel's cry. He remembered the freezing night when he and the Muhajirun cavalry curled beneath their shields, waiting for dawn to charge against tens of thousands. He remembered the cry of Allahu Akbar ringing through the narrow valley and the eyes of young soldiers ready to give their lives for belief. "O Yarmuk," he whispered, "you were the summit of my life, where blood and faith became one. I wish I could live that moment once more, to hear the hoofbeats again, to die once more as a warrior." Silence returned. Khalid beckoned everyone closer. "I want you to remember this," he said slowly, each word pressed into the air. "This world does not need more men who raise swords for hatred. It needs people who fight for light. Every age has its own kind of sacred struggle. Mine was on the battlefield. Yours is in knowledge, in mercy, and in truth. Do not let my sword be only a symbol of blood. Let it be a symbol of belief." Those were the last words of Khalid Ibn Al-Walid. He had longed to die to the sound of clashing steel. Instead, he left the world in stillness. He whispered the Shahada, "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." His final breath slipped from his lips, soft as sand falling in the desert. When news of his passing spread, the city of Homs seemed to hold its breath. Soldiers wept as if a father had died. Even former enemies bowed their heads. They knew that a man like him comes to the world only once in many centuries. Khalid did not truly die. His image lives in the pages of history and in the hearts of those who believe. Real faith is not measured by battles, but by the legacy a person leaves behind. Khalid's legacy is a reminder that Islam is not protected by the sword alone, but by wisdom, character, and compassion. Centuries later, the scholar said Nursi wrote that in an age of civilization, victory does not come from the sword but from the power of words and persuasion. His words carried forward the message Khalid left behind. In our time, the swords of Allah are not on the battlefield. They are in the heart, in the pen, and in the way people live and inspire. Perhaps, if Khalid were alive today, he would smile to see Muslims who carry books instead of blades, who do not conquer through war, but through kindness and the light of knowledge. In the end, every true victory begins with an awakening of the soul, where a person finds the strength to become a sword of Allah in his own age. Let us keep listening to and exploring stories like this, where faith, wisdom, and character come together to light the path of those seeking their way home. Join the Spiritual Echo Stories community to receive more insights on belief, history, and the journey of spiritual awakening. If these stories have brought you something of value, subscribe to Spiritual Echo Stories today and help us bring deeper and more meaningful content in the next videos.